vielleicht nur als 5%.
Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington. I'm Simon Marks, and in this news bulletin I'll be bringing you updates on stories from across the world. Experts say United States President Joe Biden's trip to Europe could be a very challenging one. They believe European nations are still cautious about embracing America's demands after the Trump era. Will Joe Biden be able to rebuild the lost trust with NATO and the European Union? We'll get you more on that story shortly, but first, let's take a look at the top headlines. Joe Biden has just departed on his first foreign trip as US president. He's heading to Europe. He'll attend a three-day G7 summit in the UK, then meet with NATO allies in Brussels, and finally hold a one-on-one meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The venue for the most high-profile talks of the year is revealed. Preparations are underway at the 18th century Villa Lagrange in Geneva as it gets ready to host talks between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. Ahead of Biden's European tour, China slams the US over its new industrial policy bill. It aims to strengthen US tech and production of semiconductors, among other things. Beijing says the US should stop seeing China as an imaginary enemy. India reports over 90,000 new coronavirus cases with over 2,200 deaths in the last 24 hours. The British government slams graduate students at Oxford University over the removal of Queen Elizabeth II's portrait. The Magdalen College president, Dinah Rose, says that the college strongly supports free speech and political debate. The UN Special Envoy on Human Rights Abuses in Myanmar warns of mass death and starvation following clashes between the military and rebel groups. The UN estimates that more than 100,000 people have been displaced in the Kaya state near the Thai border. El Salvador's president says Bitcoin will become the country's legal tender, making it the first nation to adopt a cryptocurrency for everyday use. Joe Biden has just left us here in Washington, D.C. He is heading to Europe for his first overseas visit as US president. The G7 summit will be Joe Biden's first stop on an 8-day trip. Ahead of his visit, the president tweeted saying that the trip is about realizing America's renewed commitment to its allies and demonstrating that democracies can both meet challenges and deter the threats of this new age. But the trip could be a massive challenge for President Biden as he seeks to repair ties with traditional allies and partners. The traditional allies, NATO and the European Union, have concerns. Experts believe the experience of Donald Trump's administration has left scars that will take time to heal. They say the European Union is more cautious now in embracing demands made by the United States, as President Donald Trump not just cheered Brexit, but also weakened NATO and called the alliance obsolete. He hesitated over endorsing NATO's mutual defence commitments and called some of its member countries deadbeats. All this and much more has left European leaders understandably traumatised, and gaining their trust again will be a major challenge for President Biden. From the US military withdrawal from Afghanistan to defence spending, from Russia and China's dominance to climate and vaccine diplomacy, from trade disputes to tariff issues, there are a lot of crucial discussions lined up for Biden's European visit. But European leaders have witnessed 75 years of US foreign policy vanishing overnight with a change in the presidency. And many of them fear it can happen again. A change in political scenarios in EU member countries is also something that could limit Joe Biden's room to manoeuvre. In September, Germany is set to replace Chancellor Angela Merkel. The French presidential election is also scheduled to be held next year. While there have been signs of bridges being rebuilt between the United States and the EU, will Joe Biden be able to repair the trust that has been lost? Well, the world has its eyes on Biden's key Europe visit, for which the US president has now embarked. There is no love lost between Donald Trump and social media companies. Ever since his ban on Facebook and Twitter, the former president has time and again called out the platforms. But this time, Donald Trump mentioned even banning them after Nigeria banned Twitter. The former US president said more countries should be banning Facebook and Twitter. He even went on to say that he should have banned them when he was president and would have done so if Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg had not kept calling him or coming to the White House for dinners. This isn't the first time that Donald Trump has hit out at the Facebook founder. A few days ago, he said that next time he was in the White House, there would be no dinners, no invitations for Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. At their request, he says those dinners took place when he was in the White House previously. Facebook recently extended its ban, of course, on Donald Trump's account until 2023, after which the company will assess how much of a risk to public safety he is. In addition to his 2-year suspension on Facebook and Instagram, Trump has also been permanently banned from the Twitter platform. Apple has introduced a new privacy feature called Private Relay. The feature is designed to obscure a user's web browsing behavior from advertisers and other third parties. However, this feature will not be available in China and a few other countries for regulatory reasons. In a worldwide developers conference held on Monday, Apple revealed a new service called iCloud Plus. The feature Privacy Relay was one of a number of privacy protections that Apple announced at the annual conference. It allows users to mask their identity while browsing the internet using Safari. The user's data will be sent through 2 separate servers, meaning that neither Apple nor the user's network provider will be able to see that data. The feature will most likely not be available to the public until later this year. A spokesperson from Apple said that the new feature will not work in China. Using unauthorized VPNs to access blocked websites is, of course, illegal in China, although Apple's new privacy feature is not technically a VPN. It acts in a very similar way. The Privacy Relay feature will also not be available in a few other countries, including Egypt, Belarus, Uganda, and Saudi Arabia, due to their local laws. Apple's decision to withhold the feature in China is the latest in a string of compromises that the company has made. Apple generates nearly 15% of its revenues from China. However, the internet is closely monitored by the authorities in Beijing. A vast surveillance system is maintained by China's ruling Communist Party to keep a close eye on the internet browsing of Chinese citizens. In a major policy shift, Google will allow its rivals to appear as default search engine options on Android phones for free to cement its search engine dominance. 80% of the world's smartphones use Google's Android mobile operating system. In 2019, the US firm asked rivals to pay for appearing on a choice screen on new Android devices in Europe, from which users could then pick their preferences. Rivals were asked to participate in an auction. Meanwhile, Google could also face challenges from rivals in other regions, including India. According to a 2019 report, India had nearly 350 million smartphone users, and the majority of them used Android. According to the latest data, Google Chrome has over 84% mobile browser market share in India. It's followed by UC Browser and Opera. Both of those browsers have nearly a 5% market share each. An FBI-led multi-nation crackdown on criminals around the world, Operation Trojan's Shield, has led to the arrest of over 800 suspects in 18 countries. Drug smuggling, money laundering and other criminal activities were brought under the radar of law enforcement agencies, and as you'll see in this report, they used an encrypted phone sting.
Raids across 18 countries, over 800 suspects arrested, drugs, firearms, cash and luxury goods seized. All under one worldwide sting, Operation Trojan Shield. Hundreds of suspects were arrested after criminal gangs were tricked into using a messaging app secretly being run by the FBI. As per the police, criminal gangs thought that the encrypted app called Anom was safe from snooping. Little did they know it was a trap and that millions of messages on the app were monitored by the authorities. Messages about drug smuggling, money laundering and even planned killings. Operation Trojan Shield by FBI, along with Europol and law enforcement agencies in a dozen more countries, has resulted in a massive global crackdown.
Hundreds of law enforcement operations on a global scale, from New Zealand and Australia to Europe and the USA, with impressive results. More than 800 arrests, more than 700 locations searched, more than 8 tons of cocaine and more.
The success of Operation Trojan Shield is a result of tremendous innovation, dedication, and unprecedented international collaboration.
The seeds of the sting were sown in 2018 by Australian police and FBI. Law enforcement agencies had taken down 2 encrypted platforms, EncroChat and Sky ECC. These platforms were earlier used by criminal gangs to organize drug trafficking and underworld hits. With gangs hunting for a new means of communication, the FBI stepped in with a covertly developed app, Anom, that was installed on modified mobile phones. In the last 18 months, FBI provided phones via unsuspecting middlemen to more than 300 gangs operating in over 100 nations.
The criminals using these devices believed they were secretly planning crimes far beneath the radar of law enforcement. But in reality, the criminals were not underneath the radar. They were on it. The FBI was monitoring those conversations. The very devices that the criminals used to hide their crimes were actually a beacon for law enforcement. The criminal users didn't know that for more than 18 months, the FBI captured more than 27 million messages between users around the world who had their criminal discussions reviewed, recorded, and translated by the FBI.
Operation Ironside by Australian police and FBI ensnared suspects in Australia, Asia, South America and the Middle East in the global narcotics trade. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that the operation struck a heavy blow against organised crime around the world. Australia has arrested 224 people and New Zealand has detained 35. In Sweden, the police say several planned killings were prevented and that a dozen criminals were arrested. The Finnish police detained about 100 people and more than 500 kgs of drugs were confiscated. Weapons and cash were seized too. In Germany, more than 70 people were arrested and drugs, cash and weapons were sealed. A norm was taken down on Monday. More than 27 million messages from about 12,000 devices in 45 languages have been collected. About 9,000 of these devices are currently active in Germany, Australia and Serbia. While the investigation was primarily focused on drug trafficking and money laundering, the crackdown has also unraveled some high-level public corruption cases. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Parisians are angry and the French political spectrum is outraged after Emmanuel Macron was slapped during a walkabout in southern France. Hours after the French president was slapped in the face by a member of the public, he's been playing down the incident. He called it an act of stupidity and violence that is unacceptable in a democracy.
There's stupidity, and when stupidity comes with violence, that's unacceptable. That's something else. We can't confuse it for something else. I hear the anger, and in a democracy, anger can be expressed. You know that I always come into contact with people having arguments at arm's length, and that's important to me. People express their anger to me, sometimes their distress. I'm always there. Sometimes I have answers, sometimes I don't. But I try to tackle it. Sometimes I make mistakes, sometimes I succeed. That's legitimate anger, and we'll always be there to answer to it. But stupidity and violence? No, not in a democracy.
But on the other hand, or perhaps the other cheek, this incident has made nationwide headlines. Parisians are calling it scandalous and saddening, asking for a crackdown on the perpetrators, which is in stark contrast to President Macron, who believes it to be an isolated incident carried out by an ultra-violent individual.
I find it absolutely saddening. We can disagree with what President Macron has done. We vote the next year in the presidential elections. There will be plenty of people voting against him. We'll see if he is re-elected. But this electoral campaign cannot be based on violence.
I think it's scandalous. We absolutely cannot allow this. There has to be real crackdown on this.
The police arrested 2 people in connection with the episode, including the man who slapped President Macron. However, the identities of the perpetrators have not yet been revealed. With less than 1 year to go before the next presidential election, and as the country is gradually reopening, Macron has begun his political tour of France in what can be seen as preparations for a second term in office. There have been several concerns in France about violence targeting elected officials, especially after the violent Yellow Vest economic protest movement, where protesters clashed with riot police in 2019. Village lawmakers have been among those targeted by physical assaults, death threats and harassment recently, but France's head of state has been spared until now, which is why there is palpable anger through French politics in the wake of the incident. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says that hundreds of US sanctions will remain in place against Iran, even if the United States rejoins the 2015 nuclear accord. Blinken told a Senate committee that the sanctions will remain in effect until Iran's behavior changes.
Engaged in indirect conversations with Iran about the possibility of a mutual return to compliance with the nuclear agreement, the so-called JCPOA. We don't know at this stage whether Iran is willing and able to do what it would need to do to come back into compliance. And I would anticipate that even in the event of a return to compliance with the JCPOA, hundreds of sanctions will remain in place, including sanctions imposed by the Trump administration. If they are not inconsistent with the JCPOA, they will remain unless and until Iran's behavior changes.
The Biden administration has engaged in indirect talks with Iran about reversing former President Donald Trump's exit from the accord known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA. The discussions, brokered by European nations and held in Vienna earlier this year, are at a standstill over which sanctions to lift. Iran insists that all American sanctions must be lifted, while the US says some will remain due to concerns over Iran's human rights record and its support for terrorist groups. Over 800 people have been killed and thousands detained by security forces since the Myanmar military staged a coup on February the 1st this year. All along, Myanmar's journalists have been playing an important role in exposing the brutal crackdown. Many journalists have been detained, but some remain missing to this day. But here is the story of one journalist from Yangon who somehow managed to escape the military's iron grip.
This is Burmese journalist Mrat Kyoth. He won AFP News Agency's 2017 Kate Webb Award for his outstanding coverage of the ethnic and religious conflicts in Myanmar. He further rose to prominence after the coup for his criticism of the military online. And that is when the trouble began. Soon, soldiers arrived on his street in Yangon, searching for him.
On March 11, those soldiers came to my streets and then searched for someone. But, luckily I was not there. So my neighbor, my friends, the next door just take pictures of them and then he sent me. And then, he told me, you should leave Yangon right now because, they were searching for you.
Mrat had to endure an arduous few months as he quickly found himself on the military's wanted list for his reporting. Military's torture of prisoners had sent shockwaves across Myanmar, and one particular image still haunts him, that of a murdered activist from Suu Kyi's party.
Like this picture, it's stuck in my head still right now. Because, they pour the hot water in your throat, and then all the, tongue and then eyes are out, and then your face is like, only one night, like this. So that makes me like, I have to do something, I cannot be arrested.
More than 800 people have died and thousands detained in the military crackdown on the pro-democracy movement. Journalists have been on the front line. The military shut down 6 publishing houses and 4 digital media outlets. 87 journalists have been arrested so far, 51 are still in custody. Some remain missing. Mrat left his home on February 12th and never went back.
We're just like waiting for the doors knocking, actually. If someone is coming to our house, sometimes we heard that footsteps on the ladder. It's just like it's coming for me. This kind of feelings all the time we had. But not only me, all the people right now in Myanmar, they have that kind of feeling. So when even the heavy rains can make them fear, actually. Because, the heavy rains sounds like sometimes a gunfire.
He managed to reach Thailand with the help from friends, NGOs and ethnic armed groups. He claims he had help from some ordinary soldiers too. But he felt safe only after landing in Europe.
My best friend and friends, even right now some doctors and the teachers join that PDF to fight against the military. And then I'm here right now. So that kind of feeling makes me feel guilty. But on the other hand, that, if I can fight, or if other journalists are fighting against the military, who will write the news?
In the 4 months since the coup plunged Myanmar into chaos, there have been near daily protests across the country. Most have been brutally crushed by the military. But Mrat believes that the pro-democracy protesters will eventually break the military.
The pro-democracy, protester will break the military, he thinks. Because right now, many self-organized groups are also appeared, self-organized groups with, guns, and then a lot of young people join the People Defense Forces to fight, physically against the military.
Before the coup, journalists had faced some restrictions. But after the military takeover, things have become much worse. Myanmar ranks 140 out of 180 countries in the 2021 Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Raw courage on display there in Myanmar. I'm going to leave you with a different type of courage. These visuals from Elblag in Poland, where a soccer match had an unexpected pitch invasion after a parachutist landed in the middle of the field. The referee, seeing the funny side of the incident, gave the intruder the yellow card. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of WION Live, broadcast from Washington. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.
O Jezu. O Jezu.
One World Trade Center that is the one where the impact.
The cause of India's freedom for many years.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
America is a constant work in progress.
nur als Imposant.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views, and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.